Good afternoon. My name is Dan Kirshner. I'm the Executive Director of the Northwest Gas Association, and I'm pleased to have you on our monthly webinar. This month, the webinar features yours truly talking about our 2016 Northwest Gas Market Outlook. I wanted to remind all attendees that we have you muted here in order to avoid a great deal of audio disruption that we find we usually get on large teleconferences. There are a couple of you who I see are not muted, so hopefully you have the phone muted there on your end of the spectrum. If you want to submit a question, please use the messaging function on the GoToMeeting control panel at the very bottom of the control panel. I am typing a message in and we'll send it here in just a moment for you all. I will be seeing these during the course of the presentation and as they come in. The good news is I don't have another guest speaker, so I won't have to interrupt them. I'll just interrupt myself and answer your questions. So I've just sent a note here saying text questions here, and you'll see where it says type message here. So again, everybody's muted, and hopefully we'll minimize audio disruption that way. Type your messages in the chat function of the GoToMeeting control panel. And with that, I'll just go ahead and get started with the presentation. Please do. I welcome questions, and I look forward to answering them for you. So please don't hesitate to ask them as we're going forward. So moving on then, just a little bit for those of you who are not aware of who the Northwest Gas Association is. We are a trade association that represents the interests of the 6 natural gas utilities and the 3 natural gas transmission pipelines that serve Idaho, Oregon, Washington, and British Columbia. There are about 3.5 million consumers in this region, and you can see the graphic representation of who our members are, where they serve, and there's also a little piece on here showing where we get our natural gas supplies from. So what is the natural gas outlook? Well, it really is a unique product, we think. I haven't seen anything like it elsewhere across the country. We take the integrated resource plans, or IRPs, of our member utilities and the long-range planning documents of our pipeline companies, and we aggregate that information and try to come up with a consensus view of what we're expecting to happen in the Northwest, in the region's gas marketplace, as I say. So it's unique in that it's a consensus view of what's happening in our region with regard to gas demand, supply, and infrastructure available to serve the region. In the 2016 outlook, I want to say that not much has fundamentally changed, but everything feels different these days. And we'll go into some of the dynamics behind that statement as we go forward. So what really hasn't changed? Well, we're still faced with an abundant supply of natural gas. This has been a phenomenon we've enjoyed in the region for a number of years now. In the last couple of years, we have experienced dramatically low prices. We're also seeing, with regard to forecast demand growth, pretty modest demand growth, and currently the capacity, the infrastructure capacity in the region appears adequate to serve the region's needs. At the same time, everything's different. We've seen this experience this sustained low commodity cost environment. We're seeing a slowing global economy and an uncertain policy environment, certainly in our neck of the woods in the Northwest. Within the context of the natural gas world, I would say that uncertain policy environment is definitely a phenomenon we're grappling with here. Don't need to spend much time on this. A lot of gas and it's all the way around North America. This is, again, the total available resource in the U.S., according to the Potential Gas Committee, which is an independent organization that is housed, I think, somewhere near Colorado State University, but it's petroleum geologists and others across the country that every 2 years take a look at what they think the natural gas resource is available in the United States. We may even have some potential gas committee members on our call today. But a pretty dramatic increase. This is the shale phenomenon that we're all familiar with in that available resource, and we've seen that really reflected in Canada as well. A couple of years ago, Canada was estimating that it had about 400 TCF of gas remaining available, marketable gas remaining. And then 2 years ago, after a fairly thorough assessment done by the National Energy Board in collaboration with the provinces of Alberta and British Columbia, they revised that estimate to almost 1,200 trillion cubic feet, so about a 250% increase. The point is that just in the last few years, because of the shale, our ability to produce hydrocarbons, natural gas in particular from shale, we've seen a dramatic increase in the resource available to us. Again, not a new story over the last few years, but one that bears repeating. This just shows the proportion of natural gas being produced historically in the U.S. So these are actual production numbers from the Energy Information Administration. And you can see that 10 years ago, shale as a proportion of the production was very small. Today it's more than 50% and projected to get even larger as we go forward. Please feel free to type any questions you have in the text function of the GoToMeeting control panel. I'll just remind you of that from time to time. This is very interesting. This actually was an article that came out of the Energy Information Administration 2 weeks ago, March 11th version, and they continue to project increased production of natural gas, even in the face of dramatic reductions in natural gas and oil-directed rig activity. So 2 weeks ago, or maybe even last week, they were under 100 rigs being employed, gas-directed rigs being employed across the U.S. That's the lowest level since Baker Hughes started keeping track of this more than 30 years ago. By comparison, I think it was 2008, there were almost 1,600 rigs employed in gas-directed rigs being employed. And you can see there's been a dramatic drop-off in oil-directed rigs as well. In fact, between the two, oil and gas, just today, Baker Hughes released its rig count, and it was under 500 between the two, about 90 and change gas-directed rigs, and the remainder oil-directed rigs. But the phenomenon here is that in spite of less rigs out there, the Energy Information Administration continues to project growing gas production this year and next. They believe it will pick up at the end of this year, 2016. This is just a graphic image that demonstrates where the Northwest derives its natural gas. Again, this is not new for many of you on the call. Hopefully it's informative for some of you. But you can see essentially three production areas, discrete production areas that we get our gas from, including Northeast British Columbia, Alberta, and the U.S. Rocky Mountains, mostly Wyoming, Colorado, and Utah. And this is the production forecast, again, according to the EIA 2015 Annual Energy Outlook and the National Energy Board's 2016 Canada's Energy Future, which was just published in January. You can see there that Alberta, the solid lines represent Alberta in blue, British Columbia in purple, and the Rockies and Dakotas, frankly, in green. I couldn't take those out, but most of that production, I think, is coming from the Rockies now. And the dashed lines represent, in Canada's case, what the reference case would be adjusted if there were no LNG exports. So you can see that Alberta production doesn't decline much. It's declining a little bit over the next few years. British Columbia production increases whether or not there's LNG exports, but increases pretty dramatically with LNG exports. And that's just to say that there is a large volume of resource in the ground that's likely to stay in the ground if LNG exports don't occur. At the same time, I just want to reiterate, production in all of these areas upon which we rely here in the Northwest for our natural gas supplies, well, with the exception of Alberta, the Rockies and Northeast BC are both projected to increase over the next several years. I'll be curious to see what the Energy Information Administration says in its annual energy outlook that it will release in, I think, June this year about production. Given the low-cost commodity environment, we'll see if that picture for the Rockies changes. So, in conclusion then, in our supply section, nothing new. As we said, abundant resource, shale gas is transformative. Production technologies continue to increase, and I think we have a new production paradigm, really, where we're producing more and more gas, and oil for that matter, at lower and lower break-even costs. I don't know what the threshold is. Maybe there are folks on the call who have a good sense of that, but folks continue to be able to produce in spite of this very, very low-cost environment. And then, of course, the Northwest has access to very robust supplies, and we're well connected to those supply areas. We're going to move on to prices. Again, we're not going to spend too much time on prices. This is the wellhead price of natural gas since 1981, all adjusted to $2015. And you can see that today we're paying less for natural gas, the commodity, than we did in 1981. There aren't very many products that we can buy today. I think maybe it's natural gas and computers that we can buy today that are a lower cost today than they were 25 years ago on an absolute basis. So this is pretty dramatic. I did a calculation and took the average annual wellhead cost price of natural gas from 1981 through 2000, adjusted each of those annuals to $2015, and then took an average. So the average $2015 price, wellhead price of natural gas from 81 to 2000 was $3.95 a decatherm. From 2001 to 2010, you can see the big spike there. The average 2015 annual price of natural gas at the wellhead was $6.61, and since 2010, that price is down at $3.57. In 2015, it was actually $2.62. I have a question here from Alan. How is wellhead price calculated? Lower 48 volume weighted average. I believe that is the EIA's methodology, but it's pretty easy to go to EIA and look under production data, and they have all of their assumptions listed right in there. So thanks for the question, Alan. Projected natural gas spot prices. The new data on here is the Northwest Power Council's fuel price forecast that they adopted as part of their 7th power plan, which they adopted in February, just a month ago. And you can see, so the older data, the blue line is EIA's 2015 outlook. Again, my expectation would be in their 2016 annual energy outlook that line would come down and probably be closer to where the Northwest Power Council's ACO and SUMAS price forecasts are. That dashed line is what the EIA was projecting in 2008 prior to the recession. So the point of this slide is just forecasts for natural gas prices going forward are certainly lower than they were prior to the recession and prior to the shale phenomenon. This again is data from the 2015, EIA's 2015 Annual Energy Outlook, and it shows that this incorporates some of the low oil prices that we've seen, although I'm not sure if it will change given that we've seen that continued low oil price for a year now. But this just shows that natural gas on a gasoline gallon equivalent is still has a good economic benefit over diesel and gasoline liquid fuel. That's just an FYI for folks. I know that the natural gas vehicle transportation, natural gas as a transportation fuel market has slowed. It's much more difficult to make the argument today in the context of very low oil prices, but it's important to understand that there still is an economic argument to be made, even though it's a tougher one today. So these are the conclusions. I don't really need to read them for you. You can read them for yourselves. But I think the main thing we're paying attention to and trying to understand is how long-lived is this low-price environment, both oil and natural gas, I think we can safely say that certainly the price forecast, long-range price forecasts have been down since the advent of the shale phenomenon. That's as far as I'm going to go with regard to projecting gas prices. If I could do it with any certainty, I probably wouldn't be here, and that's a joke we've all heard a number of different times. Eric Hassan asks, what does GGE mean on the fuel cost comparison chart? So the previous chart, it's gasoline gallon equivalent. Okay, thanks for the question, Eric. So let's take a look at recent gas demand. A couple of things that I'll note for you on this slide. Industrial demand remains pretty small. We're not seeing a lot of growth and don't anticipate seeing a lot of growth in industrial demand. And generation demand is growing and pretty robust, but also quite variable. Depends on the water year. So if you look at the 2011 bar, we'll all remember 2011, particularly the spring, is a very high water, high wind year, and gas being the fuel, the generation fuel on the margin, we didn't burn much gas that year. And then we'll look fast forward to the 2015 year, and you can see we burned quite a bit of gas. In fact, it looks to me like maybe the largest burn in this that we've seen, and it was, of course, we had a very dry year. I don't think we had a critical water year, but it was very low, certainly. The last bar on there, the one outlined in the dotted line, is the first year of our forecast, the 2016-17 heating year. And one of the things that our members need to take a look at is why are we under forecasting industrial demand? So that's a weather normalized load, but industrial demand doesn't change much with the weather, and it looks like we're underestimating. If you look at industrial demand in both 2014 and 2015, actually every year, it looks like we are under forecasting compared to historic demand. So that's something we'll want to take a look at. The fact is, across our region, in the last 15 or 20 years, we have lost industrial demand, or I should say, as a proportion of demand, weather-dependent loads have increased. Maybe that's a better way of saying it. So to the point now where 3/4 of our load in the region, annual load, is a weather-dependent load, about 30% of it is industrial load. So the only implication of this is it just means we're using the pipeline systems, the infrastructure in our region, pipeline storage and the like, differently than we were 20 years ago. And this is our forecast. So we're forecasting under 1% compounded annual growth rate overall. And you can see the top line there, the maroon line, industrial demand, virtually zero. In fact, we have a 0.1% compounded annual growth rate on that. And we need to, again, I think, scrub these numbers and figure out what's going on there. But this is not different than what we've seen over the last few years. It was a little more robust last year. I think we were picking up on some of the growth or coming on the heels of the recession. But this year we're just pretty much saying we don't see any real new industrial loads, or we're not directly planning for them yet. They haven't been permitted, et cetera. It's not to say there aren't prospective loads out there, but they are not currently being accounted for in the integrated resource plans and other planning documents of our members. Residential growth is at a little over 0.5% compounded annual growth rate, and generation growth is at a little under 2%. These are both lower than they were last year, and we're starting at about the same place we did last year. So a little bit slower growth even than last year we were projecting. This is a peak day forecast comparison from our outlook that we did just prior to the recession and our outlook that we're doing today. And this is consistent with every outlook we've done since the recession. The point of this is the recession had an impact on our peak day loads, on our loads in general, but certainly on the peak days as well. So we're seeing growth in the peak day, but I don't think we're even back to that first year peak day prior to the recession. Pretty dramatic impact that shows up in this chart from the recession, shows up in this chart well, I think. Any questions before I move on? Feel free to type your message in the chat function of the GoToMeeting control panel at the bottom there. So, about the biggest conclusion we can come out of our demand section is we're facing quite modest organic demand growth. Some of the variables are where's that growth going to occur, especially as it relates to gas for generation, where and how much is going to be needed, and what about the potential for large loads, which we'll talk about here in just a moment. Is there significant opportunity for transportation fuel? Probably 3 years ago we would have said yes, but this year that argument is a tougher one to make, and people are slower in picking up that baton and running with it. Eric Yasin asked, absolute industrial demand has fallen over past 15 years per my chart. How much is due to higher efficiency use of gas and how much is due to plant closure? If we go back to that chart, I can answer some of that. I think what we see in this is really the loss of what I would call demand destruction in two tranches. One was around the Western energy crisis in 2001. You can see the bar in 2000, we lost a pretty good sized tranche of industrial demand for natural gas there. That was the exit of the primary metals industry from the region, so our aluminum smelters. And then the other tranche we lost was in 2008. If you compare that to the 2007 industrial demand, you can see we lost a pretty good sized tranche there as well. And that was, we are pretty confident, as a result of the exit of some of the wood and paper products plants in the region. And anybody who's driven south on I-5 through Albany, we have a case in point right off the freeway there where the Weyerhaeuser plant that used to be there, used to be operating, was closed by Weyerhaeuser in favor of shifting some of that capacity to more modern, higher efficiency plants that they built in the southeast and the like. I think, so I would say, Eric, in response to your question, 2 tranches due to plant closures, maybe some marginal loss due to plant efficiencies, but really most of what we've lost has been through those 2, I think those two events, the Western energy crisis and the Great Recession. Thank you for the question. So one of the things that we did, we noted on our forecast slide that we're not seeing any industrial demand growth, but we do know, and very little generation demand growth really, but within our forecast horizon, there are several projects that have been proposed to serve the region, including we know that there are some coal retirements that will occur within the forecast horizon. We're aware of a number of general industrial projects, and these could be fertilizer or LNG for transportation purposes, marine and the like, and a variety of food processing. And then a couple of suggestions on what we call large load industrial projects, whether that's LNG export or the methanol plant. So one of the things that we did was we decided we'd set up some scenarios and take a look at what the impact on our overall demand could be. So we included a coal retirement. We basically said there are almost 1,200 megawatts of coal-fired generation that will retire in 2020. And we suggested that maybe as much as 800 megawatts of that would be replaced with gas-fired generation. These are just our swag, our best bet, and people could argue these assumptions. We just wanted to see what this would look like. Sorry about that. We'll try to bring it back up here. There we go. So then the general industrial and the large load industrial, you see us describing those there. So I will say on the large load industrial, what we did was we've taken the methanol plants. They are proposing 3 sites with 2 trains at Kalama and Port Westward and 4 trains at Tacoma. This 1 million decatherms a day represents the new technology that they have described across these 4 trains. So we're pretty close to it anyway. So this is what that impact looks like. You can see the purple there is the coal replacement, the aqua being the general industrial demand and the large load industrial. We pushed these numbers out a year or 2, trying to reflect when we thought they would still come on. The large load industrial, again, the methanol plants, this reflects data on their website when they think these projects will go live and in what phasing. So that's what the combined scenarios look like, and you can see that we look at. I was surprised, frankly, by how little the coal replacement would add to the region and how much the general and large load industrial could add to the region. This is just a chart that shows the facilities we have in the region, the directional, the pipelines, underground storage, liquefied natural gas or above ground storage throughout the region, and pipeline capacities at various interconnects. We are recording this, and you're welcome to go on YouTube and pick this up. We will also be publishing the Outlook itself within the next month or so. Data tables will be in the Outlook and all of these graphic images to the extent that you're interested in using them. You can download them from our website. If you need them sooner, just give me a call, and I'd be happy to provide any of these images to you, subject to appropriate attribution. Just a chart that shows the different capacities, including actual storage capacity and maximum withdrawal rates. I noted that Williams Williams Northwest Pipeline has completed its repairs to its Plymouth facility and expects to be at full capacity, its ability to deliver by April 1st. I think I'm correct in saying that. So congratulations on getting that done, and the region's happy to have that resource back fully online. I'm reading a question here. This is from Paul Waringa at BC. Hi, Paul. Good to hear from you. The question is, do you see natural gas on petroleum competition? And what's our estimate of petroleum demand? I don't know how to answer that. We haven't looked into it with any kind of robust analysis. I would just say, as I mentioned in previous slides, we think there is still some opportunity for natural gas in the transportation sector, if this is the question you're asking. We think there's added reason to consider natural gas as a transportation fuel if we think about greenhouse gas emission reductions, NOx and SOx, and air quality in general. There's a lot of opportunity, but it's a harder sell to make with the transportation fleets, in particular in the region, when their paybacks extend beyond the 3 or 2 years that they were seeing just a couple of years ago in that. So I'm not sure I answered your question, Paul, and I don't have an estimate of petroleum demand. We think there's opportunity there, but it's a harder argument to make today. That's an anecdotal answer. So one of the things that we do is take a look at that peak day that we have in the region, and we plot it against our available infrastructure. And this is region-wide infrastructure and region-wide demand. Always give the same caveat when I show this slide. The demand bars you see there assume that we're having a design day, coldest weather that we think is likely to happen, and for which each of our members design their systems to serve. So by stacking those all together, we're assuming that it will be that day, that design day in Vancouver, Boise, Spokane, Portland, and all points in between on the same day. So there is some squish in those bars. At the same time, with regard to the infrastructure, we're assuming that all of the infrastructure, pipelines, the underground storage, deliverable capabilities, and LNG is all operating at 100% and first of season pressure. So there's no squish in those bars. I think the point of this slide really is that the system is not overbuilt. It's adequate to serve today's needs for the next few years, but we're starting to bump up against system capacities. And we saw that in the 2013-14 winter, which was an extended cold winter when we hit the physical capacity of one of our upstream pipelines a couple of times during that winter. Again, all the load was served, and we didn't have anything to worry about, but we're certainly not overbuilt in the region. This is the same picture on the I-5 corridor. We took a look at that because the I-5 corridor, you certainly could possibly be more likely to see a concurrent cold weather day, and you can see again the system is not overbuilt. And this, when we add then our accelerated scenarios, our demand scenarios on top, you see we start getting into areas where we probably need to think about into loads that may catalyze infrastructure expansions or new infrastructure development. Okay. This is a slide that just shows what's drawing on the slide right now. What's animating up is all of the infrastructure developments that were proposed prior to the recession, really prior to 2007. So you see a number of, down in Oregon, LNG import terminals. You see up there at Kitimat in BC, one single terminal that even prior to the recession and prior to really any grand knowledge of the shale resource that was coming, Kitimat decided it needed to be an export terminal at that point in time. These were a number of projects that were proposed to serve the region. I think the primary demander and the primary factor behind these was the desire for greater supply diversity, perhaps some desire to get to the get more capacity from the Rockies into the region. Since the recession, you can see a number of these projects just drop right off the map, literally, and have been reconfigured to address new projects. So the turnaround of the LNG projects from import to export terminals and other projects that are potentially being proposed to the region. So the point of this slide really is the infrastructure market for capacity in the region also adapts to market realities. It's important for folks to understand that infrastructure developers are always looking to try to solve the shippers' problems as best they can. And so that's what we're seeing here. So the existing system is adequate to serve today's needs, but we're starting to bump up against that system and that system's limits. New expansions are going to kind of depend on where new loads come up, and it's likely that some of these large loads coming to the region eventually will need some additional capacity. So that is the end of my slide presentation, and I'd be happy to entertain any additional questions. Again, type them down below if you have them. We'll give it just a minute for folks to furiously type in if that's what they're doing. I'll just remind you that, again, stay tuned. Look for notices from us. We will be publishing the Outlook study, including all the associated data tables and figures, probably within the next month or so. And I might take this opportunity to just remind folks that our annual energy conference that we co-host with the Northwest Industrial Gas Users and the Northwest customers, the industrial customers of Northwest Utilities, is coming up. It will be June 9th and 10th at the Skamania Lodge, and that's a Thursday and Friday. We sure hope many of you will be able to join us for that. Well, I don't see any additional questions coming up, so with that, we will conclude. Oh wait, here's a question from Eric Yassen. What is the status of the 2 Oregon LNG terminals? I recall hearing that FERC has rejected Jordan Cove. So the status of the 2 Oregon LNG terminals, you're correct, Eric. FERC denied the application of Jordan Cove based on their estimation that Jordan Cove had not demonstrated sufficient need through contracted commercial agreements, basically. They also invited Jordan Cove to come back and reapply the moment they're able to demonstrate commercial agreements for the project. The essence of FERC's denial, and there are folks with Williams Northwest Pipeline on here who will tell me if I get this wrong, was that there were no customers that they could see via commercial agreements for the project, and so they didn't feel that a sufficient need was demonstrated for the project to warrant it going forward. The rest of the FERC order basically said, when you show us that you have customers for the project, then feel free to reapply. Just late last week, Veresen, the project's developer, announced commercial agreements with JERA, which is a Japanese consortium that includes TEPCO, the Tokyo Electric Power Company, I think is what TEPCO stands for. So a couple weeks late, but and that was for 1.5 million metric tons a year of LNG. So still lots going on with regard to the status of the Oregon LNG terminals. I don't think they're dead yet. Let's just say that. FERC's denial was not not an absolute denial. It was basically a denial based on current conditions and an invitation to come back when those conditions change, which now Veresen has begun at least to demonstrate that those conditions are changing. Hope that answered your question, and I'm getting a affirmation from Williams Northwest Pipeline that I got it about right. So Ken Fuhrer has a question. Over the past year, there's been a wider price differential between Station 2 and Sumas. What has caused this, and is it expected to continue? I'm going to say I don't know the answer to that question. And Ken, if you want to contact me offline via email, I'll do a little bit of research and see if I can answer your question for you. Thanks for the question. Okay, well, with that, I think we will go ahead and conclude this month's webinar. Hopefully you found it interesting. You have my email address, my phone number there both. Please feel free to write me any questions you might have or give me a call, talk about anything you heard here today. I love the opportunity to discuss all of this stuff at any time. So that is my open invitation to you to contact me at any time. In the meantime, thank you very much for participating, and stay tuned for our next webinar, which will be, I don't have the date in front of me, but it will be at the end of April, and it will be the Common Ground Alliance discussing the Damage Information and Reporting Tool, also known as DIRT. This is consistent with the theme of April, which is Safe Digging Month. So we hope that you will all know what's below before you dig in your garden. Call 811 2 days before you're going to dig and get those facilities located so that you can do it safely. Thanks, everybody, and we'll talk to you next month.